Peace, everybody. It is I, the Energy Master Allah, and you are watching the Leopard in the Mirror, Canticle of the Mutant Guardian. Ooh, excuse me, Canticle of the Mutant Guardian, not the Garden. Lecture series. It is episode 5, and we are continuing where we left off with the last one. I'm gonna go ahead and spin this around. If you don't already have the book, make sure that you grab one of those on Amazon. All right. And, yeah, so we're in the middle of a conversation, in the middle of a chapter that was kind of long, so we're going to pick up the second part. Hope you were able to digest everything that was in the last one. As always, I record these live on Facebook first, and then I upload them onto YouTube. So if you are watching on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe, make sure that you hit that like button, make sure that you drop a comment if you have any questions, and we're going to go ahead and get to rocking, all right? So, as always, I will read through the section first, then I will go through it bit by bit. Should have some things to doodle on the whiteboard today, so let's do it. All right. As Earth, Adama is associated with the cube, which is Kaaba in Arabic. The 26 letters of the English alphabet correspond to the 6 faces, 12 lines, and 8 vertices of a cube, as well as the 8 faces, 12 lines, and 6 vertices of the octahedron that both inscribes it and is inscribed by it. These letters fit neatly across the arms of a pentagram, dividing them into a 10-6-10 ratio that further captures the 5-3, 8-5, and 13-8 phi approximations. In addition to the pentagram being the basis of our 5-point body design, the 16-10 ratio between one of the star arms and the rest of that line is twice the proportion of our height and is the proportion of valence electrons to core electrons in iron. Iron in alchemy represents earthly power and the raw base state of humans and matter as we start the journey toward a purified ego. Iron is from a word specifically associated with blood inside the body, associating it with a living property. Proto-Indo-European uses a separate word for blood outside of the body, associating it with death and cruelty. This is possibly tied to why Nisabiti writing is called cruel letters. As a masculine judicial counterpart to Uri, Allah Ana Ani's gift to women. Art derived from nature and the magnetic field lines generated relative to the natural markings of the body. This is related to our chemical or red ray body, governed by our root chakra at the base of the spine. Thus, Chem, the source of chemistry, comes from both black and ignorance in Egyptian language. Black comes from to burn, to shine, and ignorance is simply a state of unknowing, unawareness, or unobservability. Only about 0.0035% of the light spectrum is directly detectable by humans, so our entire purpose of manifesting is to leave our default state of unconditional love and all-knowingness, experience what it is like to not know, and learn conditionality and discernment. Just as absence makes the heart grow fonder, that distance from love is what helps us realize that love is our default state, one we can constantly return to while in life. What we can't see with our eyes, the broadband light absorption of our melanin captures, processes, and converts into heat. Hence, the Nakash in the garden is a representation of the vibrational relationship of the alpha values with specific positions within the toroidal field of plasma generated from the apple core of our awareness. The precursors for the dark melanin of our skin are found in meteors as old as the universe itself, and the act of absorbing light, then releasing infrared light as heat, is scaled down, analog behavior of the black hole at the center of our galaxy. Where it releases hydrogen plasma, our melanin both evaporates water and disassociates hydrogen atoms from water molecules. The iron oxide is a weaker expression of the chemical compound in magnetic tape used for audio-visual recording devices. Our blood records our ancestral experiences. Our skin arranges melanin on the surface to tell a story. Odinani is typically derived from "it is in the land" or earth. If you look closely at the word Odinani, it appears to be a contraction of Odi, Inani. Odi is the Afa word meaning midnight, dark, night, a time of spiritual activity and transitions. Inani, being like a contraction of Ina Ani, is actually a Bantu word that becomes gift, grace, in Kosa and number, value in Zulu. This implies that in addition to its explicit meaning, Odinani is a reference to the number of midnight, which is 12, like the lines in the cube mentioned earlier. This perfectly matches the description of the construct explored by Darius and the OBE practitioners like myself. There are 12 heavens and a 13th that serves as a container. They were created and are governed by 12 beings, associated with the 12 zodiac signs and a hidden 13th, known as the original serpent, who was associated with the constellation Ophiuchus. The 13th can be thought of as the center of the cube, the core containing all of the other 12, like the tribe of Shabazz as the 13th tribe of the moon. The Bantu contribution of Inani leads to Central Africa, in the Congo, where the Ishango bone was discovered near the equator in 1950. It is a 20,000 plus year old tool for recording moon cycles and the oldest known example of humans using complex math. Alpha serves as the communication channel for Odinani, as well as a map of the cosmos. The word Alpha is itself an equation for the golden ratio. The gematria value, or sum of its letter values, 1 plus 6 plus 1 equals 8, forms both the first digits of phi, 1.618, and the 1618 of Matthew 16:18 in the Bible. In supreme mathematics, 8 is build or destroy, which is building to add on to life and destroying to take away from life. This is the manifestation of the complementary ciphers at the beginning of this section. Matthew means gift of the Lord, taking us back to Inani. Lord comes from a compound word for guardian of loaf. The roots of that phrase ultimately resulting in become aware of turn or revolution. Matthew 16:18 is thus number becomes aware of turn revolution equals 1.618, or quantum self-awareness generated by logarithmic spiral. Peter, which means rock, is described by Jesus as the rock on which his church would be built. The word church comes from ruler, Lord, by way of to swell, spread out, be strong, prevail, showing that Jesus' statement to Peter that the gates of hell will not prevail is a play on words. Hell comes from the same root meaning as revelation, which is to cover, conceal, save. Jesus comes from the Lord saves, thereby giving us a meaning for Matthew 16:18 of Peter becomes aware of the revolution of revelation, or the rock with quantum awareness of the turning of primordial matter that covers man. John, the other contributor to the Gospels, means God is gracious. Therefore, John means that which is invoked is Inani. Speech and its sound forms are geometrical in nature and require a framework of measure and retrieval in the form of pronunciations and meanings to transform. John is credited for the Gospel of John, in which Jesus compares himself to the bronze serpent lifted on a post by Moses. He is also the author of Revelation, in which Jesus becomes the Lion of Judah. Just as the serpent of the Old Testament becomes the lion of the New Testament, this same confusion of Nakash produces the word chameleon, meaning lion of the land or serpent of the earth. Depending on whether you use a solar or a lunar calendar, the date one would get for the end of the current Quran cycle described in the Supreme Wisdom lessons would be either 11,914 CE, which spells Asad, meaning lion, or it will give you 11,916 CE, which spells asp, which means cobra or shield. Confusion between words for lion and cobra is thought to stem from comparisons between a cobra's hood and the mane of a lion. The compromise or axis between these dates is 11,915 CE, which is Asay, meaning altar, sacrifice, ash, or related to essence, life force. Both Revelation 16:1 and 16:18 begin by describing voices. Verses 16:1 through 8 begin to describe 7 angels pouring vials onto the earth, into the sea, into the rivers, and onto the sun in that order. This appears to be a reference to the root chakra, sacral chakra, solar plexus chakra, and heart chakra, respectively. Peter, as the rock on which the church is built, seems to describe the calculus on which the turn or spread of the earth occurs, as analog to the unfolding radiation of the magnetic field of the heart. Calculus is the math that uses curves to track changes over time. Calculus is also from the root meaning limestone, the material used to make counters on an abacus and to build the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid's alignment with the North Pole allows it to also be aligned with Earth's axial precession through the zodiac. It serves as a means to measure the synodic orbits of various astronomical objects, such as that of Venus. With its 225-day orbit, it revolves around the sun. 8 years on Venus is close to 5 years on Earth, 8 to 5 being the 1.6 approximation of 5 that resembles the 1 to 6 relationship of the crown chakra to the 6 chakras of the body. The 360 degrees of a circle divided by 225 is also 1.6 degrees. Over the course of 8 years, Venus's solar orbit creates the shape of a pentacle in our sky, aligning with the nature theme of the Empress card in tarot, also associated with Venus. As stated before, the 8 to 5 ratio is the proportion of the human body below the solar plexus to the body above the solar plexus. The A of the Syrian image projector is thus right at the phi center of the body and our center of gravity. The Great Pyramid is sometimes referred to as Meru, the navel of the planet, a designation more commonly associated with Kailash, the abode of the Hindu gods, or to Meru Prastara, better known in the West as Pascal's Triangle. It is the heart chakra, however, which is at the center of our light body, creating a dichotomy between the ego and the heart. This chakra is associated with the sustainer or hearer, Vishnu, and the syllable U, the 21st letter bringing B and A together to experience the projection of the Ba, that allows us to experience the spiritual world as a universal construct during an OBE. Like the alignment of the Quran cycle to the Asay, the alignment of the Ka must come before the projection of the Ba to form a Kaaba, which is the Akh. This is why the chanting of Om must go through the solar plexus before connecting to the heart and completing at the throat. For thine eye to become single and map the full body as a microcosm of the universe. Adiyogi is said to have arrived atop Mount Meru/Kailash 15,000 years ago to teach this very technique. This is the same period as the start of the Quran cycle in 13085 BCE. Kailash means crystal and is a reference to the missing crystal apex of the pyramid. In this context, Shiva, Sheba, Saba, Shabazz, Shabes is a description of how the crown chakra projects the colors of the other six into the body. And Shiva's 7 sages are the 7 notes associated with those energy centers in all of creation. Think of the solar plexus as the generator/projector that converts sound into light that shines into the prism of the heart, which in turn divides the light into a spectrum of 12 that is filtered by the throat into the third eye for perception. Sanskrit Arushi means first rays of the sun of the rishis, creating a bridge between Yoruba Orisha and Igbo Alusi Arushi by way of Igbo Uri Esa, 7 poems, to give insight into Shiva's association with the Saptarishi. The bones, skin, teeth, ligaments, tendons, and cartilage all generate piezoelectricity when subjected to mechanical stress, including sound vibration. Likewise, the Great Pyramid and other ancient monuments take advantage of stone with similar properties. Most importantly, the pineal gland, the seed planted in the center of the Fibonacci spiral of the head, is covered in calcite crystals that generate charge when vibrated. Symbolized by the leopard in Odinani, the leopard is also the totem of Oshosi, the hunter and the Risha of justice, associated with OBE and seeking the shortest path to one's destiny. The center of the 25,000-year Quran cycle is 585 BCE, the year of Thales' eclipse, considered the first accurately predicted astronomical event in Western history. The union of the sun and moon represents both the coordination of the solar and lunar calendars and balance between the masculine and feminine, nadi channels of the body. 585 also happens to represent 585, the ratio of points to lines to surfaces of a pyramid. Understanding this theme of 4 points connected by a single apex is central to understanding the story of humanity, both in how ether becomes divided into the 4 elements and how the 4 sons of Ham, or Chem, represent melanin, the house of Alpha, being divided into the 4 key alphabets that reassemble into the Syrian image projection. Oh, baby. I gave y'all a big slice to chew off for this week. All right. What a way to start your morning, right? But if you're watching live, it's the evening, but Lord have mercy. If you're getting this bright and early on Monday morning, this is like an electric jolt, because I'm sure you've never, if not rarely, heard many of these concepts in concert with each other. You might have heard a couple of them together, but missing that African contribution to it, that's one of those travesties that has plagued our world. If you don't understand the origin of all, everything looks separate. You're cutting off the head so that everybody can look separate. And if you were paying attention, you might have noticed that theme. All right, so we've got a lot to chew on, so let me run through it. Okay, so the first thing that we run into here, it says it's an association of the 26 English alphabet system with 8 vertices, 12 edges, and 6 phases or planes of a cube. There should have been faces. Yeah, I corrected it in my copy, but it's not. I guess apparently it's not. I ain't updated in here, so that'll be correct in the next edition. Or maybe I was channeling, and that's exactly what I meant. It says it gives an Ichi code of 8126. Image credited to Igbo History Museum. So if you can't, man, I suggest that everybody go check out the Igbo History Museum. It is, check out his site online. A lot of delicious stuff on there. It's dedicated largely to the work of Professor Catherine Cholonu, who, if you have the book, or if you've been through the other lectures, you know that she and her daughter Ifananya, I give them a shout out, because the work she did showing the linguistic connections and the research that she did into artifacts and things that show undeniable parallels between specific Igbo and West African traditions, the way that words evolved throughout Africa, and with those customs in India. And Western academia has fought tooth and nail to try to convince you that there is no association, that any type of parallel is completely coincidental. But I've got 2 years of research, and I don't even know how many notebooks at this point, because I know I'm well over, I know I have at least 30, but it's probably way more than that. Or whatever, just understanding these different languages, the evolution of these words, the migration patterns, who was mixing with who, what are these genetic markers that still are retained, looking at geometry, looking at common numbers that continually appear as if they are dimensionless constants of some sort. There are a lot of work has been done to not try to force connections, but to see what's already being said and accepted, but not being said in the same room. Okay. All right. And I do all that, I say all that to preface that this is also something like this is from like an Igbo description. Like this is something that is already part of that. But this is also found in Jewish Kabbalah. So they'll tell you that it's just like some old mystical nonsense. But the fact of the matter is, as we say, when we say Islam is mathematics and mathematics is our self-Lord and master, you cannot master yourself and therefore the microcosm of the universe within you without understanding the math of your body and the proportions of your body and how that design is echoed throughout creation. It is your birthright to lead, but only one who is aligned with the math of the heavens can truly say, I, self-Lord and Master. The reason being is because you will rarely have to convince somebody of what you are saying if they can do the same math and see whether or not it adds up. So on some level, in the past, I have described the supreme mathematics as an error correction system for speech, whereas as we're building, like as a 5% as one of the gods, when you're building, which is having conversations with each other on the knowledge. You are using qualitative distinctions for the numbers 1 through 9 and 0. So they aren't just merely abstract concepts. There are practical applications associated and descriptions associated with each one of those numbers that have to make mathematical sense in and of themselves. So for instance, you should know by now that the number 1 is knowledge. The number 2 is wisdom. And the number 3 is understanding. So that means that the distinctions for each one of these numbers has to work such that if I were to say knowledge plus wisdom equals understanding, it has to be justified. Well, how is it justified? Well, we can reduce this to observation. Wisdom is manifestation and application, and then understanding is the mental picture drawn from both of these so that you can see things for what they are, not what they seem to be. Okay, so what you can see combined with what you've actually tested and applied and you've put into action, allowing you to internalize that external observation. Where the internal and the external meet, we get an understanding, which is a mental picture. Now that already makes sense on some level, but then now that I understand the mechanism of the brain and how the interrenal cells, so that's your $1,000 word of the day. Interrenal. I know I'm gonna mess this up. Interrenal. That might be it. Cells. All right, so they map these like a hexagonal grid. All right, so it fires calcium ions. It's like the calcium ion that your sperm donates to the egg when it enters it, and then causes it to catalyze and activate and begin the process of life unfolding. So it's pretty much like, so when you consider something significant, whether it be because it is exciting or because it has shocked you or frightened you, whatever it may be, if your brain reads it as significant, it's going to fire these ions onto this grid, and it's going to basically create a specific pattern that it stores as memory. And so when that pattern returns, whenever you're recalling a memory, it's using that structure to help you recreate it. So you're basically compressing that information. It's encoding that information the same way that we may see images on the computer, but they're actually stored or running through that hard drive in the form of 1s and 0s. Similarly, the organization of those calcium ions on that hexagonal grid are encoding information. So it is exactly like computing, or I should say that computing is doing its best imitation of what we already do naturally with our human design. There is no computer that can compete with what the body is doing on a regular basis. All right. So this right here, the fact that it's mapping this 2D hexagonal thing should pique your interest, because what I just drew there is also the way that we tend to draw a 2D projection of a cube in 3 dimensions. All right. Like if I were to make this wireframe not see-through, you basically see something like this. Okay. So that's just me being able to see the back and the front at the same time by being able to see through it. But the fact remains, this is still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and therefore a hexagonal representation. So this right here is sufficient enough for your brain to simulate cubic positioning. And so as this diagram is showing right here, the 26 letters map on to the 26 elements of this cube. So you got 6 faces. So we got 6 letters for that. We've got 8 points or vertices. We got 8 letters for that. Then we have 12 lines. So the rest of the alphabet would be dedicated to those 12 lines. And then the reverse is true too. So if I reverse this such that lines are connecting the dots or whatever, you'd have what's called an octahedron. So octahedron is the shape that fits perfectly inside the cube. And so instead of it having 6 faces and 8 points, it has 8 faces and 6 points. And so one of the easiest ways to draw one of them bad boys is to do this here. It's like 2 pyramids. It's like one sitting on top of each other. Okay. I can also do that. I can also draw it using a hexagram. All I gotta do is make this part of the center equator of it, and then basically draw a triangle inside of a hexagram, and you have the top part of an octahedron. All right, so there's one way to draw that projection. So it's like, so I can have these two things have an equal 2D outline. And if I wanted to draw one of these inside of one of these, all I'd have to do is make the adjustment here by drawing a triangle inside of it. Okay. And keep that in mind, because if you look at that too, so whereas it is both a cube and a octahedron, I also have a hidden shape that comes out of that, which is the tetrahedron. So you see how there's one of those inside of there? So remember, the tetrahedron was what started this whole thing out, the man in the house, right? And then if you could see both sides of the octahedron, you'd be able to see the back of it. And so I draw another triangle in there. And then now what I have is basically a Star of David inside of a cube, right? So that makes it one of these. So all right, my Merkaba is all inside your brain. If you look inside of there, you see something else forming. You see another hexagon that's forming. And that hexagon has lines connecting its lines. All right. There are models that show that's what the center points of space. It has something to do with what's called vector equilibrium, like where space balances out perfectly. So you're getting into some deep geometry associated with the organization of the smallest possible aspects of the universe. This is all happening in your brain. This is how you map space. You basically, quote unquote, taking photos that you can recreate and walk through in your mind. All right. Okay, so the other, I did not, that's what I meant to do. I meant to grab something to use as an eraser. So I'm going to have to get on. Let's see what I got hanging around. So this is one of the drawbacks of cleaning up, is that you don't have, oh, there we go. Got something here. And when you clean up, you don't just have convenience stuff lying around for you to be able to just grab at your convenience. But I did stash this away. La da da, la da da, erasing the board. Okay. All right, so the next application of this same 26 situation is The ratio, so we've talked about this in other talks, but the 5-point star, so we just talked about the 6-point star. Let's talk about the 5-point star. So the ratio of this arm to the center to this arm is 10 to 6 to 10. I'll talk all about this in the bonus episode. If you didn't watch that, go back and watch that. All right. And so because of that, I've got the ratio of the center to one of the arms, with the arms to one of the centers, is 10 to 6. The ratio of one of the arms to the long line that can be made right there is 16 to 10. And the ratio of one of those long sections to the whole span gives us 26 to 16. All right. So this comes here, this comes here. Easy peasy. All right. And so if I reduce these, because these are fractions, so that ratio thing, that's the same as a fraction, just like doing 10 over 6, 16 over 10, 26 over 16. Each of these can be divided by 2. So this reduces to 5, 3. This reduces to 8, 5. This reduces to 13, 8. So that is the Fibonacci sequence. So the Fibonacci sequence is, of course, I've shown you that. This plus this equals that. This plus this equals this. 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 And then it keeps on going. But then these are the ones that we are concerned with. So there are 4 Fibonacci numbers that we end up dealing with. And yeah. That's a 3, 5. So these proportions right here. All right. Let's keep going. What does it say? And then, oh yeah, so Fibonacci. So Fibonacci numbers, the number and the one before it, they get closer and closer to the value of 5, which is also known as the golden ratio. And that is 1.61803339, so on, so on. Okay, it's the most irrational number. There's nothing repeating, no repeating patterns, but it does form words, as I demonstrate in here. All right, that pentagram mirrors our bodily design. Our arm, leg, arm, head. That's Allah. If you one of them stuffy folks that don't understand the Proto-Semitic world, the word Allah simply means the God. It is Al-Ilah. That word is identical in origin to Elu, the source of Elyon, the supreme, and Elohim. So in the beginning, God created heaven and earth. Is better sheet by the Elohim. It Shamayim, no, it Hashamayim, Vet Haaretz. Okay. So same word. This is also from the same core meaning of Olo and Olodumare. This is just a full word. The container of the rainbow, which plays into what I talk about. I didn't talk about it in here because I didn't know it at the time when I wrote this. Like I was channeling. It's like I'm I'm blown away even reading through it now, how many things that I know now that are being perfectly exposed through just having the relationships together. That's why I mentioned all these different things together. But then yeah, they're Olu. And so you'll find that in the Igbo sphere, this has, depending on the inflection of Olo, is related to either Udu or Uli / Uri in Igbo language. So this is Yoruba language, this is Igbo language. All right, so they tell you there's no historical link between, well, the Limba are literally priests of the tribe of Levi through Aaron's line. So that's Moses' brother. His people, the Limba, are a Bantu speaking tribe. So don't play with us by any means. They are definitely connected. All right. So the ratio at our belly button, so your belly button, the proportion of what everything that's above the belly button to everything that's below the belly button, 5 up here, 8 down here. So we're intimately associated with this ratio right here. All right. Another application of the number 26 is in iron. Iron is element, has the symbol, so ferrum is the scientific name of that, and it is number 26. Okay, talk a little bit about what it represents in iron. It is associated with the color red, and it is what gives your blood its red color. The iron oxide, the hemoglobin is what it is. Okay, I'll talk about a little bit between the difference between blood. So there's distinctions between the way the word blood is used when it's outside of the body versus when it's inside. And so this association of cruel letters with Nisabidi is that's a stank translation, because Nisabidi, that's the exoteric, not the esoteric meaning that's what they tell nosy white researchers something means, so that they leave us alone, so that you can protect the secrets. All priesthoods do that. Like, until you get properly initiated, you can't just come around here just casual interest in this thing. If you're going to commit some time to actually learning it right, so you don't go out here misusing it and misrepresenting it, then you get the breakdown. And in this case, this biri is Naisi Biri or Naisi Mbido. So in or at the head, or beginning, or origin. So this is in the beginning, in the head, in the leader. All right. At the beginning, the origin, the source. So these two basically saying a pot or a source or a womb or something like that. So Olo is associated with this too. And it holds the rainbow. It's what the rainbow comes out of. So the Irish, they wanted to follow the rainbow to the pot of gold. Well, I'm here to tell you that the Rainbow Covenant leads you back to the source. Okay? light divides into the 7 colors. So reversing that process of the prism, it takes you back to the source light. Thereby, an Orisha is Or Yashar in Hebrew, the direct light. So you got the direct light, and then you've got the reflected light, or the divided light, which is the rainbow. So the unified light divides into its spectrum, and it's a holographic principle. So this is essentially how the source of all similarly distributes itself into different frequencies, if you will, and each of those frequencies becomes a divine spark, which becomes part of your soul. So you have essentially the essence of the Creator, just as you have the essence of your Father, but you are missing several parts of your memory of who you truly are, because you think you're different from who's next to you, and then they're different from the next person after that, and so on and so forth. Why did I just do with that thing I was erasing with? Goodness gracious. There you are. It's in the same place it always ends up. Right in my blind spot. So let's go ahead and clean that up a little bit. We got a lot to do, y'all. This is the meat right here. Getting a college course level of information here. All right. Let's see. Moving on. So yes. So the other word you saw me right there is uli. I'm gonna let you in on a secret. If you want to understand how words in Africa connect, so that you can understand how stuff outside of Africa connects, D, R, L, and T are fluid. They flow into each other. So you'll often see words that have an L also depicted with an R, because it's pronounced like a uri, uri. And then you get into that D. So if you can't really trill your tongue like then people might end up pronouncing it like a udi. Okay? You can start getting udu. Stuff like this, but uli, uri, udi. And then udi ends up flattening into ut. Utu. Yeah, ut. If I drop the prefix like Proto-Indo-European often does, then all I have is ut. All right, and oud. If I keep it, I get kuta, which is the exact root from which we get the word God. Okay. God is formally understood as coming from spirit, inhabiting a mound, which is exactly what Adam is described as being, because it is the breath of God called ruach. Breathed into dust. Okay. Now, what is Uri? What is Uri? You might notice that, for angel names, there's an L at all of them, because each one is an aspect of God. So if I were to put an L on there, look familiar? Uriel. That is the archangel associated with the earth. Okay. For us, Earth is our woman. So does Uri actually have anything to do with our woman? The answer is an emphatic yes, because this is understood by the common person as an art form that is similar to henna. You know, like you draw the patterns, the pretty symbols and stuff on the skin. But what it actually is you would have a dibia, a priest, come, and they would basically find the magnetic field lines of your body that, mark your destiny. That's the akaraka, which contains aka, meaning hand or spirit or branching, because the most prominent forms of these lines are on your palms. But these lines run all over the body, and then some of them require very special training and understanding in order to be able to read them. But those who can read them, they will take some, I believe they use indigo there. Like instead of using the henna plant, I want to say in Nigeria, they may use indigo. But, or whatever other plant. But they trace those, and so the different symbols that come out of there, like you see on my hand, I've got like a Y shape and stuff. I've got like an A-type shape, so yeah, that's not an accident. So all these different kind of symbols end up becoming Mr. Beauty. So as opposed to just being decoration, these various symbols and radicals are combined in different ways in order to record information, to perform judicial, create judicial documents, and like the court recorder, instead of sitting over there with a typewriter, they draw on these symbols, and it is the arrangement of those symbols, and not like how we write out words, but actually relationships between those symbols that tell you what the overall meaning is. So this is the exact principle that is associated with hieroglyphics, which was also inherited into the old Chinese and these different glyph-like systems. Technically, cuneiform is supposed to be a glyph-like system. These can become more and more abstract as time progresses, but essentially the unified language that they say was at Babel functions just like this, and then Insibidi is essentially a manifestation of that early base. Okay, then I talk about this is related, so this relationship to Earth, as I said, is related to our chemical or red ray body governed by our root earth chakra at the base of the spine. All right, so this is a concept from a book that if you aren't able to find a copy to read it, I highly suggest you find the audio on YouTube. I have listened to it a couple times. Not because I'm just so in awe and enamored with it, or I just believe everything they're saying. No, if I see something that usually how I end up discovering something is that I'm pretty much used to, as it relates to like the esoteric or the new age or all that other stuff, I'm pretty used to them leaving black people out of the conversation. They'll tell you everything about Hindu culture. They'll tell you everything about Chinese culture. They'll tell you all these things. They'll go to Egypt. Most you'll get out of Africa is oftentimes Egypt. But they'll do all of this, but the second that you try to bring up African anything, it's like, we don't see color. I was like, you just seen yellow and brown and all those. What happened when you got the black? Lord have mercy. You don't know whether you're going or coming. You can't study alchemy without respecting him, which literally means black, dark, the wholeness. It is the wholeness, the completion of space. You saying to yourself, well, Emma, I was taught that Kim means Egypt. Wrong. Kemet has to do with Egypt. Because whenever you put that T on something in Egyptian, it gives it form, it gives it physicality, it denotes that it is now land. What's that, land of form? So this is the formless. So remember, it says when we were talking about in the beginning, the earth was formless and it was dark. That's what it's talking about. All right, it's the essence. That essence condenses into form. That isn't some, foofy thing. Your sciences is people getting paid good money to tell you about wave particle duality. When we're looking directly at something, the wave state collapses into certainty. We know exactly where that thing is. This is why knowledge comes first, because it is observation. Observation gives us certainty, and this certainty collapses the probability field such that we know exactly where something is. All right. So the other spelling we get for another manifestation of Kim, something like this right here. And then in that case, it still means black and dark, but then we end up getting ignorance. That is not the same as stupid. It's just what you don't know. It's what you have not yet learned yet. The word black itself comes from to burn, to shine, which seems paradoxical, but the vast majority of light. So if our visible spectrum is only 0.0035%, let's see, so that puts 99999 10 5 6 9 9 9 9. So 99.9965% of light occurs as straight up blackness to you, or you don't see it at all. How about that? All right. You need, in order for there to be motion, things have to change. You cannot measure the exact position of an object and its rate of motion simultaneously. Because if it is in motion, its exact position is constantly changing. You have to stop it in order to have an exact measurement of its exact position. So that's central to this duality as well. Complementarity, if you will. All right. So for everything that you're seeing, that's how much that you're not seeing. Seems like a paradox. All right. But you have that so that you can learn discernment, how to be able to tell what's right from what's not right, what works from what doesn't work. What your eyeballs can't catch, what it can't see, your melanin does, because your melanin absorbs almost about this much, like it's close to total. Let me put it this way: of the spectrum of light, melanin absorbs close to all of it. So what it's doing, what you see this with your eye, but you detect this with your skin. So so if you have this stuff, you're pretty much wrapped in a giant eyeball, the same way that sea urchins are. What happens with that information? Well, it gets converted into heat, which is infrared light. and it dissipates along paths called phonons. And these are vibrations in a lattice, which are essentially the equivalent to sound. There's a stuff called Akash or Akasha. You've heard of Akashic records. Well, where's the record being recorded? The only attribute of Akash, which is space, atmosphere, by extension, breath. Remember that Ruach thing? The only attribute of this is sound. All right, it is not yet motion. It is sound itself that needs to be put into motion in order for you to hear it. Sound is essentially stored as frequency, which is time. It is timing. So it says a particular timing of the essence of this thing, this wave of this thing moving past a certain point allows for the perception of a specific frequency. All right. So this means that if your melanin is converting UV light, which is the word, so both of these actually come from the same root. So kash or kashi, that's light in Sanskrit. Well, akasha is essentially the dark. So it's the space, it's the dark. It's the part that you can't see from the light, the visible and the invisible. All right. But invisible does not mean non-detectable. So this is associated with sound. So it is not itself sound, but is the medium through which sound travels. All right. And I'll talk about the Nakash. So they told you it was a snake. They told you Eve was in the garden talking to a snake. And this one messed me up the other day. I just learned this. All right, so apparently we got some terrible mistranslations of the actual Hebrew words. And if you did not allow yourself to look at the clarifications that are found in the Quran, it's the same story. It's just the clarifications. They brought the math. So just to give some context, when the Temple of Solomon was destroyed in 585 BCE, they also lost what was called the Ummim and Thummim, along with the Ark of the Covenant, among other things. So they lost all the way that they used to use to talk to God. The way they were talking to God was basically pulling lots, which is basically these strips that tell you, either gives you a yes or no answer. So yes, it is very much similar to not only African divination systems, but, and let me write those names down too. So Ummim, this is in your Bible now. It's stuff I'm coming up with. I ain't got that kind of time. I just report what I see. So it's a query system, just like how this has binary, that had binary. It's all the same stuff. The Limba or Bantu, the Proto-Bantu, and the Niger-Congo family. This is all same. This is why we all have that same male haplogroup. Only 15% of the planet have the DE haplogroup lineages. 10% of those are the 10%ers. 5% of them are the 5%ers. The poor righteous teachers of the planet Earth versus the rich slave makers or bloodsuckers of the poor. Alrighty then. So they told you it was a snake. The serpent. They have two different words for snake in the Bible. There's a different word if they're talking about a literal snake. But serpent is word or membrane in ancient thought. So when it says it is the shining one, it is the black one. when they say, let's see, the Nakash is also one. It's like a diviner, if you will. So one who reads this, so it's basically a priest in the garden. What are they doing here? Why is he telling Adam and Eve this stuff? Well, the issue is these are fresh people. These are new people. And he's basically giving them the knowledge of self. Problem is, if you ain't ready for it, it could have negative consequences for you. But at the end of the day, everything that they went on to experience, they were going to experience anyway. Because it's just like being a child, where your mommy and your daddy, they protect you from the truth of the world, and you get out there and you wonder, and all sorts of things happen to you, and you wonder to yourself, what happened to the world? It changed. No. The world has always been the world. It's just that your awareness has been sharpened. So basically, Nakash was awakening them to him. And the Naku stand that Moses puts up, that comes from the same word, is the brazen serpent. And Jesus says, like the brazen serpent of Moses, the Son of Man should be lifted up, should be exalted, should be raised. Okay, so who was the serpent in the garden, really? If the crucifixion, if the salvation, if all of that couldn't happen, you can't rise unless you fall. So who orchestrated the fall? Who orchestrated your ignorance? Even if you're gonna take it to an Islam perspective, in terms of Nation of Islam of 5%, why then did Yaakov make devil? Not because he was mad or pissy. He did it because that's what he was destined to do, because that was the opportunity we were going to have to prove that we're God. If everybody's God, you don't ever have to prove it, so you don't even know why you're God. But if you're put in a position with somebody who no longer has the access to their uri, their akaraka, they don't have it clearly mapped on them, they speculate, they make things up. So they call it telling lies in the lessons, but what it really is a loss of the knowledge of themselves, not just in a mental capacity, but also not having the markings that we have. We know a leopard by its spots. You know what's by our markings. Jeremiah 13:23, which I quote all the time, and in fact it's in the beginning in the quotes section of this book. Well, I ain't put the whole thing, I just put the part that was relevant. Can the Ethiopian / Cushi change his skin, or the leopard his spots? And they use that to say that your character is tied to your color, and then there's a deep association with the people of the Central Nile, the West Nilani people, the Shiluk, the Anuak. These peoples right in the center of the Nile, where their words similarly relate to their blackness in that way, associated with their character, with the thing that connects them. Some deep etymology going on right there. All right, it says alpha value. Now this is the craziest thing right here. All right, so it says, I put in the garden is a representation. The Nakash in the garden is a representation of the vibrational relationship of the alpha values with specific positions within the toroidal field of plasma generated from the apple core, quote unquote, of our awareness. During that time, I had no idea that about the hippocampus and how it maps reality, and it is governed by a protein called YAP, the yes activated protein, which basically does a binary choice system based on different tension in the cells. Like the tension of the cells decides whether it goes in and activates it or it doesn't activate it. So it's basically a yes-no system that's naturally in us. And it is what allows for the indentation stage of our cell. It basically forms like that apple type of organization. So your spine and everything else is coming out of that. And so when you mature, the center part of your brain so you know it's divided like a booty. So you gotta watch what kind of shit you put in it. All right, so in the center there, all right, it so in between, this is where all the spatial mapping and stuff is going with the hippocampus. It's like it's a structure in there that's sort of reminiscent of a ram's horns. So it's often referred to as almond's horns, but there's one on each side, and it maps space and semantics, which is basically like the meanings of things. And so it couples those things. So they associate meanings with coordinates. So, you know what? Maybe this would be a good time to show y'all that. Okay, because I'm doing a paper thing about it, but I think this lecture would be a great place to actually show you this stuff, because it is crazy. Let's see. It's going to be a long ass episode, because we got a lot of stuff to cover. Let me see. Downloads. What's the last version of the compiler I had? Let's see. So it should be in HTML. I think this one was good. Was this one good? Let me see if it's the one I want. Yeah, I think that'll work. All right, so I created this program to like demonstrate something. That's a long story behind that. It's a video all to itself. But let's do some stuff. So let's tighten this thing by getting rid of some of this radial breathing. Let's have 0% asymmetry, so everything is equal and balanced. Okay, and then I'm gonna go to my field coordinate source projection. Is that the one I wanted? Or do I want hybrid source? I think I want field coordinate. I need some layer opacity there. Let's add a little bit more curvature. Is this the one I want? We want only the source quadrant. Let me switch that to the other side so you can look at that. Let's do top right. I think that's all I had to do. Let me make sure. Okay. Yeah. Let me do the hand overlay so you can see it. Have my joints on there. Hand wide. Yeah, so you can see it clearly. Bam. All right, so when I mapped, so I basically used some math associated with the pyramid at certain frequencies. I used certain math associated with the division of the celestial sphere of the night sky into its 88 constellations. So I realized that the frequency associated with the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid is the number itself is approximately 1/4 of the angle that you have to divide the celestial sphere up into in order to have the 88 constellations. And me not writing stuff off as coincidence, I also interpreted the 16 alpha seeds, so there's 16 in EPHA as well. Seeing that they are binary codes, I also figured out a way to translate those into coordinates in a field of space. And what I ended up getting is, as you cycle this thing through time, you see that it takes on this bouncing tetrahedron-like shape that appears to also morph into a pyramid. So it bounces between like a pyramid type shape and then a tetrahedral type shape. But then I realized that there's these bars. You see how there's kind of like this bar that extends from it. I realized that what I'm looking at is the geometric, crude wireframe basis of how a hand operates. So you see how you have like this triangular type formation right here. If you look at this as where the wrist would be, and you look at that as the thumb in 3D, it's like this is the broad part of the hand, so like where the fingers are, and this is the thumb, so that would be like left thumb. So if I'm looking at my left hand, and so if you watch the rotation of it, it looks like a hand rotating around, rotating at the wrist. And so what this is showing is that the stories that are in both Igbo oral tradition as well as Hebrew oral tradition, that fire letters, remember fire is associated with a tetrahedron and partly with the etymology of the word pyramid. But these fire letters were derived from hand signs, just like Nisabiti and the Judeo-Arabic alphabets that are essentially tied to Canaanite or Nabatean in the case of Arabic, but especially the Canaanite / Phoenician contribution. These were black people, man. Don't let them lie to you with these stories. But that's what they are. Alpha seeds, you see it. You see it yourself. The alpha seeds, when they're mapped on the 3D space, they behave like a hand, and they show tetrahedral and pyramidal geometry. That's what the pyramid actually is, y'all. It's a model of your hand. So African divination was not just a bunch of mumbo jumbo, but it is actually exactly what the priesthood of the Levites and Aaron and what they were using before the first temple was destroyed. So after the first temple was destroyed, they largely relied on speculation and councils instead of mathematical certainty, which is what the Quran sought to restore. Every single one of those faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, when they first started, it was understood that God was flesh and blood. He walked in the garden. He displays different characteristics, talks with Moses face to face at one point. But later down the line, when the Greeks started talking about how, God is distant and invisible and disconnected and all of this, Jews and Islamic sources started to also follow suit. But thankfully, we have Nation of Islam and the 5%ers here in America to restore your understanding of how God could be in the flesh, how you are descendants of the first man and designed to be. In fact, it said, I forget what the word is. It's a specific word, Khalil or something like this, but it basically means successor to God. So God was preparing Adam to become God on this world, and you know, things happen, and, you know, wickedness deters us from, you know, remembering who we truly are and what our duty is and a relationship with each other. But these people were not just sitting around coming up with stuff. They made sure that it was mathematically verifiable, so you would never have to rely on any one person's words. I, self, Lord, am Master is what Islam is supposed to stand for. All right. But that's the whole apple core. So the apple in the garden, that's what it is. It's a toroid. You take on toroidal geometry as a cell or a 16 cell thing when you're in the womb, and then it eventually expands out and you become a U. All right. Similar geometry is found in the way black holes emit hydrogen plasma from the centers. That's interesting. Your melanin behaves a lot like a ton of little micro black holes, except not nearly as intense, but it does the same thing, absorbing light and releasing heat. So that is a property of black holes. So you are a projection of the black hole at the center of our galaxy, which is Sagittarius A. No buts about it. You are a microcosm. The universe is lazy and it uses the same design motifs over and over again. Odinani. So Odinani is the name of the Igbo system. Is equivalent to the Isese of Yoruba, or the priesthood of Aaron. These are all from the same basic type of source. They don't want you to know there's a connection. They don't want you to know that these things are operating on the same principles that on which our computer sciences are built today. They don't want you to know it. Because they want all the power. They want all the know-how. They'll give you the tech job, but they won't tell you that you're actually doing the same thing that they did in order to determine what the Torah and the early Quran were going to be. Uh-oh, cat's out of the bag now. All right, Odinani, it is in the earth is how people often interpret that. I break that down to a ridiculous degree in my description. We tie it to the number 12. And we talk about it midnight. So I was like, number 12. So that box there with those 12 lines that we were talking about. Talk a little bit about the construct here. If you want to learn more about that, make sure you look at some of Darius's videos online. But I have targeted a couple of them, just enough for me to know, like, yeah, there's something here. I don't really need to know what's going on in all of them unless, you know, that becomes the center and focus. But the most important thing is clearing up the language. For me, at least for my path, is clearing up this language, giving you the distinctions and vocabulary that you need in order to overcome your resistance and your blockages when it comes to your logic. You don't need to speculate if the math is already there and the relationships already exist, but you just have not been initiated and trained to see those relationships. He talks about this thing called the original serpent. So original serpent is the source word. It's the embodiment of the source word. The 13th that holds it together. The Ophiuchus constellation perfectly aligns with the African equator and therefore passes over the mountain of the moon, the mountains of the moon. It is the orphan, the one without parentage, the tomb, if you will, Hirama Bif, if you will, who wrestles the serpent. So he's the conqueror of the serpent. He's the one that understands the word, the master of the word. Remember I told you Olo was both the container, the pot, and it also means to master, have, own. So to master something is to embody it, not to lord over it, but to bring it into yourself, to contain it. So if you contain the words, it's to send sound within yourself. That's the other debated definition of God. They didn't understand how, how it connects, but it's very accurate. Is that which is invoked. Interestingly enough, and I'll get into this in a minute, but then, talking about Peter would be the stone that's the foundation of the church. He doesn't say church in the original. He says ecclesia, which you may recognize from Ecclesiastes. But what ecclesia, it can mean to gather and stuff, but it ultimately comes from to call or invoke. That which is called or invoked. Invoked is to fill with voice. So spirit inhabiting a mound, spirit is Akash, whose only attribute is sound, aka Shabda. Therefore, it is saying to fill the body with voice. You have the ability to, your self-awareness is tied to the fact that you have the ability to speak and send sound with intention throughout the body. You can modulate the body. You can modulate the phonons. I just told you about phonons as sound in the lattice. You have the ability to change the phonons and therefore the heat organization and the thermodynamic shape of your body. Heat is closely associated with serpents because snakes see in infrared. So what the serpent sees is based on the word that you have organized in you. How do you have that? Is it orderly? If not, it's going to give you trouble. So the word was not orderly within Adam and Eve. And the thing I told you earlier that messed me up was that the descriptions, if you go back, it basically suggests that Adam, when they say Adam's a man, they're not talking about a male. They're talking about humans. So it was the species as a whole. So it was both male and female. So you had it was a whole species. What Eve is, which comes from the Hawa root, like pretty much like Yahweh does. This is life force. So essentially what it's saying is the communication between the divine and the life force, the chi and the alpha, or the ori and the Ifa, that relationship gave those people awareness. And because they were not ready for it, the punishment is essentially what happens with Kundalini sickness, which is hallucination. So if you're not properly initiated into something, peace, Jeff, shalom. If you're not properly initiated into the word, if you don't know how to interpret the letters themselves, the math itself of the Torah or the Quran or the Bible, whatever it may be, it's going to cause delusion. And you're going to perform actions based on your understanding of it rather than the intended understanding that was divined. Once again, during the first temple period, it was divine using the Umim and Thumim, but then in Africa, this was in the form of Ifa and Alpha. Among other things, the Dogon, they had Ava. You often hear a form of that word that is similar to that. So even the word Ava gives you an idea of where we really get Eve from. So the Adam was the species, so it was already humans. But then the life force, the companion that is drawn from that, is your personal spark. That's how the personal divine spark, be it whether you call it your chi or your ori or whatever else, human soul, whatever it may be. That's what it was. So if you aren't properly guided and aligned, then you are not aligned with your divine spark, and then therefore your identity is skewed and you identify with the animal body as opposed to you understanding your divine purpose. That's what this story is talking about. Once again, that stuff I'm just making up. It is me connecting the dots via the math and via understanding how the languages preserve the meanings themselves. It's a very intelligent design, and it was very much present in Africa before anybody came and colonized or made somebody do a different system or whatever else. But essentially all they were doing was returning their own knowledge back to them. All right. Talk about the discovery of the Ashango bone. I've done entire videos on that. So I know for a fact through translation. Matter of fact, I'll show you real quick. I think I understand it enough at this point to where I can give you a quick explanation of how to translate the Shango bone. So you've got a column to the left, and I'll just write them like down this way. It's easier. You got a center column and you got a right column. So this is a bone. This is a fibula, which is a leg bone from a baboon. Mind you, Thoth, the famous Thoth of the Emerald Tablets, has a form, has a baboon form. Sometimes they say it's like a cat-headed baboon, which is actually very relevant symbolism. Cat-headed baboon. Spelling it all wrong. It's called Ani. Remember that Ani was the name of the spirit of the earth. So Ani, Allah. All right, so you start seeing how all these things come together, but this is Thoth. I'm gonna show you something else slick. That's how they came to start writing Thoth right there. So they were still using the W as like a omega and stuff, and then that digraph there is you could think of it as like a hardened D, so it becomes a th sound. So Thoth. Well, Dalet, Vav, Dalet is where we get David, who wrote the Psalms. And researchers of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth have long noted parallels between things said in the Psalms and those things written in the Emerald Tablets. And so if you were to take those dates seriously, you're talking about stuff that is between 35,000 and 25,000 years old. And the Shango bone has been dated to exactly that, to 20,000 to 25,000 years ago. So the inscription on it is actually a remnant of Atlantis, which was originally called Kusha. So it was the land of Kush. And it was considered everything beneath the equator. So everything at the equator below was Kusha. And these stories of Atlantis came because of you had events that dried up Lake Victoria as well as Lake Megachad. And while it was dry, they built civilizations in these regions. And as the ice ages came to an end, it caused rapid flooding very, very quickly, which turned a lot of these settlements into like archipelagos. So it's like a little series of small islands. And then in some cases, they were buried all together with mud and silt. So all the evidence that kind of helps, confirm the stuff I'm saying, it was buried. But in recent times, fortunately for us, they have radar technology that shows that there are structures that are much lower down beneath, like Lake Victoria, and even things up under the pyramid. So once again, not stuff I'm coming up with. But anyways, this bone, it has exactly 168 notches on it, which is the equivalent to the number of hours in a 7-day week. So So 7 days. So you got your 6 days of creation and the 1 day of rest. All right. The bone is organized into 60, 48, and so it's 60 left, 60 right, and 48 in the center is the total of the numbers on there. This is 12. Remember I told you about that number 12 as it related to midnight in the womb or whatever else, but this is a base 12 system. And so that reduces to 12 times 5 times 4 times 5. 5 plus 4 plus 5 equals 14. And our fifth letter is E, 4D, 5E, 14. So that's what Eden is. So the Garden of Eden is in Central Africa. All right. It looks like a cool parlor trick, right? But it's more than that. So the exact notches are clustered on the bone. The left column is 11, 21, 19, 9. Right column is 11, 13, let's see, 17, 19. Center column is 3, 6, 8, 10, 5, 5, 7. The easy ones for the left and the right are KUSI. That is the old way that they refer to somebody as an Ethiopian or Kushi or whatever, like just like in Jeremiah 13:23. So it's already talking about Kush and Kusha, just like I said, it's Atlantis. Over here, this becomes Kim Kes, which is Egyptian for black, dark, or complete. Kes is bone, part, chapter, or the plot of a story. So the complete chapter of the story or the black story. The black bone, also known as Krishna Kanda in reference to a plant in India, but the Krishna Kanda is originally a reference to the hard part of the iboga root, which is the ibogaine is a chemical that is used in the rituals of the forest to allow you to interface with the ancestors, and it helps to reset old patterns so that you can overcome addictions, among other things. All right. So that whole mechanism I told you about earlier about how the hippocampus uses, or the interrenal cells and the hippocampus use calcium ions in order to map the things that are significant and get stored into memory. So this helps to reset that stuff, get you back aligned, and this enables you to interface with the mind and the central nervous system in a way that transfers the information of your DNA into a form that your brain interprets with pictures the same way that you do when you have dreams. So you have all of the necessary machinery to do this. This is not some whatever, but yoga and it was called sesh in Egypt or whatever, but yoga as a whole was basically the way that we taught and conditioned ourselves in order to be able to reach those states without dependence on an external tool or chemical, because we did not want what ended up happening with the Temple of Jerusalem to happen or whatever. So when they lost all of their tools, they had no idea how to communicate with Yahweh, and it was a mess. They started speculating and stuff instead of just using the oracle and doing the same thing everybody kept on doing in Africa. And so they started exerting authority based on speculation rather than mathematical verification. All right, so why is this significant? All right, so Kushi, we got the black people, and then we got this black bone thing or whatever. That's a cool little coincidence, but then the cool thing is that the Proto-Semitic phonemes, or whatever, if you apply these here, such that we have Kaf, Shin, let's see. So you either have, let's see, 19 would be Kaf or Quaf, Ka. and ta. So heavy ta. All right. What this ends up being, so in West Africa, this kwa ends up being written as kwa. So kashi kwata means bone plots, and then kwata means completely or totally. So in other words, the left side of this 20,000-year-old bone has a phrase in West African Hausa language, which is considered a Chadic language. All right. Has the exact same translation as the right side of the bone in Egyptian. So there was an Egyptian to Chadic translation showing that this bone was at least tied to Proto-Afro-Asiatic. So before Egyptian, Hebrew, Arabic, Amharic, before all of these languages were separate languages, there was a proto-language, and they were speaking this in Central Africa. All right, this central column is a little bit above your pay grade, but it essentially says Jiwa Daha Ya Haza. And then what that's basically describing is the method by which basically how God comes to earth, or whatever. So how it materializes human form and then spreads through the same means that we spread, being fruitful and multiplying and so on and so forth. And it is specifically tied to presumably the DE haplogroups as a whole, the male haplogroup line, but I know for certain the E haplogroup. So most of us as African American men, we have an E haplogroup, as do the original Anatolians, the original Greeks, as do the original people of the Levant, where all this Bible stuff went down. So we do have a genetic trace to this stuff, and it was all talked about on this bone. Okay, so they were not playing with you. They knew that you were going to mess it up. They knew you were going to misinterpret symbols. So they used an alphanumeric system in order to record the relationships between positions, field positions, rather than relying on you to be able to read some abstract words. This is how people had an understanding between each other way back when. And this is what we have to get back to. This is why 5% says Islam is mathematics, and mathematics is I, self, Lord, and master. If it's not giving you the ability to master your internal state, and if it is not mathematically and geometrically supported, it is not something that you can easily transfer to another person without losing the information, without memory loss, and without overall integrity. Just like when you transfer in a file, or when you take a big old sound file and then you save it as an MP3, you're compressing it, but you're losing some sound information there. All right, this is what they were doing. 20,000 years. I could, the oral traditions over there says that this stuff has been around with us since the time that we were even conscious, so hundreds of thousands of years ago. But at the very least, what I can prove and demonstrate to you is at least 20 to 25,000 years. Alpha serves as a communication channel for Ordinani, as well as a map of the cosmos. I demonstrate how this same alphanumeric principle is very much tied to the golden ratio, such that 1.61 is literally alpha. If I expand that out to 1.6, matter of fact, I'll give you that right there. So that'll give you PR. So Pedar has to do with fruit, so that's important too. But it also shows you that in Egyptian PR, which means they translate it as house, but what's more correctly referring to is the concept of a fruit. So it's a container that contains itself. So it contains the seeds that will grow into a tree that will create a fruit that will have seeds that grow into a tree. So it's a loop. It's a recursive loop. So this is the same thing like a toroid. And so Pharaoh, which is written as Para, right, just like fruit. It's this, they usually try to translate that as like great or whatever, but it can also mean pillar. So it's talking about the center of this fruit. So like the apple core. So that's the same way that a torus is designed. But it also translates to head or leader. All right. So if you know about the Hebrew alphabet, the letter Bet, it means specifically to house in. So it isn't necessarily a container literally in the same sense that like cough sometimes is, because cough is like the palm of the hand, but also has to do with containment. But in this case, it's specifically the idea of being in something. So in other words, if this is head leader, it is basically doing the same work as Resh, which means head, beginning, leader. So in the beginning, this is better sheet. All right. So para, that gives us Pharaoh, actually means in the beginning, in the head, in the leader. Then, if we expand that para to pyramid, mid means speech, language, word. In the beginning was the word. So this is actually John 1:1. In the beginning was the word. The actual word that they use is logos. Logos is also logic and template, which means that this word also has to have form. So in the beginning there was form that was established. So when it says creating heaven and earth, if we use our Sanskrit vocabulary, that is referring to Akasha, which is the formless state, all the way to Prithvi, which is the embodied state. The embodied state emits essence, and that essence circles back around and becomes the Akasha. So you go through all this trouble to evolve so that you can breathe, and then that breath that comes out of you goes right back out into the atmosphere. How about that? So you get compressed into a human, and then what you breathe goes back into the atmosphere for everybody else to breathe. So it is a circulation. So that is why this concept of the fruit with the seed in itself that grows the tree, that grows the fruit, the point of this whole torus shape, this donut shape that folds back into itself, that is what it's trying to tell you. And you don't have to go even make it past the first word of the Torah in order to get that. But you know, some people are a little slower than others, so you have to give them a whole sentence. And say some a little slower than that, so you got to give them a whole book. And some of them can't get that, so you have to give them a whole Pentateuch. Give them a whole 5 books. If that's not enough, you give them a Tanakh. If that's not enough, you give them an entire Holy Bible. If that's not enough, you give them a Quran. And apparently the reason we keep doing this is because it's never enough for you people. It's never enough. All right. And so then I start getting into what was really going on with 16, 18, and Matthew. Oh yeah, I need to build that out, because the next step of that is you Afro. So even the number is snitching on where it came from. So Alpha is an African divination system. So we got 3 African references back to back. That's your proof. So we got Alpha, which was made in Africa. You got Par, which is the house, the container of said Alpha. So the Alpha pot, the Udu, the Olo. So Olo Dumare, the container of the rainbow. You got Afro, which is African. I can get into what happens with the numbers after that, but it is a whole another can of worms, and we are running like mad long right now, but it is worth it, because we have got to learn this stuff, y'all, so we can clear up the word and stop all the confusion, stop all the madness. All right, so I started talking about Matthew 16:18, and this has had y'all messed up. They got some of the most delicious wordplay in this book, and y'all ain't even catch it. Jesus literally called Peter a rock, and Peter's name comes from Greek Petros, which means rock or stone. But here's what you had messed up. You didn't realize, and I will demonstrate for you. So that breath that's in the beginning that God put, that sends into Adam. I showed you earlier that that word is the ruach, which translates to the ruch in Arabic. Chi, or life force. And this is also chi, ori, all these tied together if you know how the languages work. So anyways, it is not coincidence that ruach sounds like rock. How is that possible? All right, so there is something that is still retained in African language that is lost once you move to Greek and Sanskrit. These are Proto-Indo-European languages. So we're typically understood to be African locked language and blah, blah, blah. Ain't have nothing to do with this reconstructed, made up PIE language that they put together because so many languages out there had these common characteristics. But we have a figure called Shango. So remember Ishango Bone. Already has that name in there. And he is an Orisha who is typically equated in other pantheons with Zeus in the Greek and Indra in the Hindu pantheon. These two essentially come from the same source or whatever. So the whole Proto-Indo-European thing, it basically separated between the Persian stuff and the Indian stuff, but they all come from a like Aryan source. The Aryan era of humanity started in Ghana. This is Madame Blavatsky, Theosophy, so all the popular esoteric stuff that white people eat up and love. She said it herself. The region that is associated with the Ashanti and the Akan, which is Ghana today, is where Aryan started. So all that Aryan Nazi rhetoric and all of that mess, you big dummies. This is something that was African and then spread it east. All right. So anyways, so we know Zeus as the lightning dude. Zeus has lightning. Indra has lightning. Shango has lightning. But what these two don't have that Shango still retains is the ability. He has an association with fire and stone. Okay, how is he related to stone? What does rocks and stone have to do with him? This is, you can pretty much conclude that is related to two types of ways. So you've got fire that comes up from below, which is volcano, but Shango was a human king who, upon death, like because of his passion and dedication, in death he was exalted to with the power of the pre-existing cosmic force Jakuta. And so Jakuta typically means the thrower of stones, but the actual breakdown, it is Ja plus Okuta. This breaks down into Oku and Ta. Oku itself is a nominalizing prefix, so it makes a name out of something. Ku has to do with hardness. And then Ta was like to throw or cast. All right. This Ku, so Oku basically is the one who is hard and able to be thrown. Ja is the thrower. All right. So Ja is the thrower, Oku. So these two end up giving us words like Jaku and Jauk like this. So you end up getting Juok among the Nilotic people for is their name for the Supreme Creator. Throughout the African world and moving into the Semitic world, your J ends up becoming a Y. Your K ends up becoming a Het sound here. So it splits between either Kaf or Het. So you Yak. This is how you end up with words like Yahoo, which is the first ever inscription that they associate with the name Yahweh is this Shasu Ta Yahoo. Like this. And they butcher the meaning of this to mean like wanderers or nomads of Yahoo, which they don't understand. They believe it may have something to do with life force. But the truth of the matter is, when they refer to a wanderer is the literal etymology of the word planet, but it was also used for moving astronomical objects, which included shooting stars. So that ta over here, that's to throw or to cast, also gives us ta wa ra, which ends up giving us the word Torah. So the root of it actually means to cast, shoot like an arrow, to guide, lead or teach. Similarly, the Egyptian word for star, Seba or Sabir, also happens to mean star, meteor or shooting star, gate or doorway, and to teach. So when we look at Babel, which means gate of God, we're also talking about God's meteor. We're also talking about God's star. All right. Trying to build a connection to the heavens. All right. Stargate, if you will. Our connection to the heavens is a process that is called panspermia. Where I'm going to write it down. Panspermia. Where meteors made of the oldest materials in the universe that crashed to Earth contain all of the materials you would need in order to make life. And the most abundant substance in the universe, believe it or not, it's not just something in your skin. Melanin. That crap is everywhere throughout the universe. It's pretty simple to make because it has all the same components of DNA, carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, and oxygen. That stuff is everywhere. Scientists can't figure out why. We've been telling y'all the black man is God who condenses into human form into from the essence, but y'all won't believe. Yes, you were created through our actions and, manipulating the way that we breed and isolate ourselves and different things like that or whatever. But we've been here. We're made naturally from the essence. All right. This panspermia, these rocks falling from the sky. Because of this, in the ancient world, sky gods were always associated with throwing stones because the sky was understood to be a firmament, just like it says in the Bible. And the meteors were considered fragments of the firmament. Therefore, the word rock isn't necessarily the stone, it's fragments of a whole, of a stone, so a part. All right, so rock is fragment. The Ruach, if it is your divine spark, it is essentially a fragment of the whole, of the supreme. So the same concept of divine spark, the animating principle, the Chi and Igbo, the Ori and Yoruba, these are all the same concept. It is the complete light being fragmented like a rainbow. Okay, so you got a different spectrum of people. You got all kinds of people, but we come together to form a single rainbow. That is why Orisha is connected to Or Yashar, the divine direct light. They get their light directly from God. They are just forces. But the highest, the most exalted Orisha in your life is you. It is your divine spark that you get directly from God. All right. And so the wanderers of Yahoo are actually talking about souls who are already qualified in order to move on to bigger, better things in the universe, but who choose to reincarnate here on the planet to teach and guide others. In African tradition, the reincarnation cycle is understood such that you always incarnate into your own family so that you can continue to protect their prosperity. So this is a choice that we made. And this is a choice that we made long time ago. So all this stuff that, you know, once you get into the Indo-European world where they're talking about trying to escape this cycle of incarnation or whatever else, we can leave whenever we want to, but we choose to come back. And so this is why what's his name? Why Hinduism and Buddhism kind of fell out with each other, because in Buddhism you have the concept of the Bodhisattva, one who sits under the tree. Bodhisattva is the exact same thing as the wanderer, the soul that chooses to reincarnate in order to guide others. This is why I tell you need to you need to get your mitts on the book, The Law of One, the raw material. It sounds kooky and it sounds like, you know, where they getting this stuff? They channeling this thing. Where are they talking about this stuff? Every single date that he's given, every single, like, over the years, I found and confirmed something that is perfectly explained by the stuff we don't learn about African spirituality and things of that nature that are confirmed by those exact dates, the exact migration patterns. And yeah, that's a whole nother conversation there. But when Jesus is saying, when Yeshua, mind you, rock of my salvation, is Sur Yeshuati. So the T is just like that ta ending on Jakuta we were talking about before. Yeshua's salvation. Sur is rock, and it's also city in Canaan / Phoenicians. All right, and there's a science behind what that actually means too. But then what these are, remember, same source as Phoenix. What is a Phoenix? A phoenix is a bird that is reborn by burning up, burning to ash. Remember, burning to shine is one of the etymologies of black. So these were black people. The black rock of my salvation or whatever is the black fragment of the Savior, of the cell, of the concealed, which is the blackness of space, the part of the light that you cannot see. The largest portion of the light is the black, the part that you cannot see. So this is what it's telling you. This is what was given to you in order to animate you. So the stuff that came down, this panspermia is what gave you life. If you want to know the formula for the materials that give us life, UV light plus hydrogen cyanide plus an element like copper ions or whatever that can donate electrons. If you have those three things, proteins and RNA will start building themselves. This is science. All the stuff you need for life starts building itself. Okay, so that's basically what all this is about. So the same word where we get the word hell is where we get the word cell, and it is also where we get the meaning of to save, to cover, and all of that. So that's what it really is. It gets shifted. Hell gets shifted into hell, and that hell is related to that ku hardness phoneme that I just pointed out, which leads to so we understand where the Jaku of Jakuta comes from, and how that's that's related to Yahweh. But what about that Ta? All right, so D and T are fluid. So this is how we get Yahuda, Judah. All right, or Yada, where we get the word Jew in the first place. So what the Judah is a fragment of Yahweh, a direct descendant of it. It isn't some airy fairy, just we some guys that just like him. You don't just have a covenant with him. You literally have a bond in the form of DNA. According to the law of one, the Yahweh entity mixed with the people who are called the Anak. There's a real tribe along the Nile who are called the Anak / Anuak / An. Hold on, make sure I spell this right. It's hold on, let's see. It's something that looks very much like Yahweh, and the root of it is pretty much like very similar to Yahweh. So it's like Yahweh or something like this. On Yahweh, yeah, something like this. Okay, and so they have cousins called the Shalak and the Dinka, who are also part of the Luo groups in Central Nile. But unlike these other two, Anak is the only one that has that same E haplogroup that we have. So it's an anomaly. Scientists can't figure it out. I'm telling you why. Because Yahweh, Jakuta. Got that DNA, y'all. We are Christ. In the law of one, he also describes Jesus as having been a wanderer who, instead of moving on to fifth density, chose to reincarnate or to incarnate at all and to become a teacher. All right, here comes this girl to try to put her shoes in here. So turn it down, baby. Turn it down. All right, so let her do that. All right, let's move on. All right, John's name means the same thing as Inani. I talked about the breakdown of that in Odinani. So the womb, the container of the grace. Turn it down, Khalil. Okay. All right, I got into the etymology of chameleon. How chameleons get mixed up with serpents, and the reason being is because chameleon literally means lion of the earth. That is talking about you, the Yahuda. So Nakash can also mean lion, apparently. So that shining one, so there was a lion in the garden. Lions always get mixed up with serpents because of this. Lions are also associated with serpents because the hood of a cobra is often compared in old poetry and literature with the hood of a cobra, the mane of a lion. So it has the hood, the lion has the mane. Uh-oh. You got to understand what they meant in the old world. All right. And then I think, let me see, how long do I talk about this? I talked about this in the bonus episode. All this, like, where This is recorded in the skies themselves, the calculus to change over time. I talk about the Venus synod. So the orbit of Venus in our sky, if you trace it, it forms one of these guys right here. Because we got a fire relationship with them, with that as well. The same proportion of its 8 years to our 5 years is the same proportion as your lower body to your upper body, like I said earlier. Where that happens is at the navel. Great Pyramid is known as the navel of the world. Mecca is also called the navel of the world. Meru is the navel or center of the entire universe. That's basically telling you that words, if you understand how M, N, and shift in between each other, the way D, R, L, T shift between each other, the way G and K, and the way that H and S shift in certain languages. If you understand that matrix right there, you could pretty much use the word Meru to always end up finding words that have to do with neck or connector to the head. Cat, this is why Neko is cat in Japan. And then to spread, distribute, or most importantly, anoint. So the anointed one is what the name Christ is supposed to mean, but it also has to do with this concept of the cat, so the Yehuda. He's a descendant of the house of Judah. And then the cat situation, you have something called Mu-ah, who is Ra, who turns into the great cat of Heliopolis, and it cuts the head off the snake, which is to isolate the beginning of a word, which is the whole point of in the beginning or whatever. So the quote unquote cat that they're talking about are these folks from the Mid-Nile region who basically blended and mixed with everybody, including the Bagana, is where we get the name for the Wakandan Empire in the comic books. They mix with the pygmies. They mixed with everybody. So they made sure that the black people had this heavenly bloodline. There's so many words that overlap with Hebrew and Arabic in their tongue, but then these white Westerner academics swear up and down these people ain't got nothing to do with them people. It's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. This is why I do this, and this is why you have to take the stuff that I teach on here, and you gotta start informing people. You gotta let people look it up and see for themselves. Let's see. We got okay, how long is this gonna take? So I'm cutting this off at 8:30 at the latest. But I think me looking at this explanations, and this is the explanations I gave when I wrote this thing in like 2025. So it is still astounding to me that I'm finding things that are confirming what I was piecing together here, but I'm just getting better at articulating it. All right, if all this has to do with the calendar, all right, so I can do this very quickly. All right, I'm going to show you pretty much how the Bible was made and how you can confirm whether something has been changed. This is kind of a secret. But this is essentially like every time that the Jews or the temple got destroyed or something, and God permitted, whether it be Nebuchadnezzar II or whoever he used in order to destroy this. I'm going to show you exactly how this works. So I already explained to you how they communicated with Yahweh before the first temple was destroyed basically through divination. So through the use of the Urim and Thummim. So the same thing they're doing in Africa. So it's connection to heaven and earth. That is essentially the role of Jesus. So keep that in mind. All right. So in Africa, so the whole thing is based on the anatomy of Africa. Sounds like a pretty wild claim. I'm about to show you. I don't say nothing on this live list. I done thoroughly work with stuff. Okay, so this is the equator here. All of our empires are built relative to (19,471 degrees, both north and south. This is where so the Nile runs. So we got Lake Victoria here. We got the mountains of the moon right here. Central Africa, rainforest. Mount Ruwenzori, means mountains of the moon. You got the Nile source waters that come from here. They run up toward the Mediterranean. They branch out up here. You got the Great Pyramid up this way and all the other stuff you know about Egypt and blah, blah, blah. You got Kush and stuff here. So this 19 north, so the north one, where it intersects the Nile is right in the middle of the Kush. So it's like, so Sudan is basically old Kush. This is where those people are at. I was talking about those Anuak and whoever else. Okay. So what this is, so you know the Nile, it runs from south to north and it empties into the Mediterranean. All right, so that whole thing about the neck is significant because the Nile is, I'm gonna show you where yoga comes from. So all those concepts, they also appear in Odinani. So in the Igbo preserved teachers, whatever, they got a system that is basically shows that they had this thing long before it made its way to India. Those are our family over there. All right, so anyways, this is a spine. So the only chakras that are along the spine are the throat, the heart, the solar plexus, the sacral, and the root chakra. The mountains of the moon, the source here is the throat chakra. The Great Pyramid is supposed to represent the root chakra. The throat is associated with Akash, which is heaven or spirit. The root is associated with earth. So the connector between heaven and earth is the center, which is the solar plexus. Having to do with the sun. And then that's where the Anuak, the Western Nilotes and whatever else, that's where they're from. So if you want to understand how Central Africa is connected up here, you need to look at that region right in there. Okay, so anyways, so the head is above and beyond this structure. So it's like, so if I was gonna say like a third eye would be down here, and then the crown would be really off planet, but let's call it the South Pole there. So if I draw a tetrahedron whose center is on the equator, its top point is at the South Pole. All right, it fit the way it fits inside the sphere of the Earth. It will always hit on that 19.471 line. Same on this side. So if I have a point that's at the top with the North Pole, it would always hit the bottom of that tetrahedron. Would always hit at the bottom, so it forms a Star of David over Africa. All right, so in this region along the 19.471 is where all the most energy expulsion activity happens in the planet. So you'll always have like volcanic activity, or you'll have granite form, and then so granite is full of quartz crystal. All right, so the word from Meru in India refers to Mount Kailash, and Kailash literally means crystal. All right. Here in Central Africa, the mountain of the moon, it is full of quartz veins as well as gold. When there's tectonic activity, like earthquakes or whatever else, it causes those crystals to produce an electric current that causes gold that's in the groundwaters and stuff to accumulate and come together. So you got some of the biggest gold nuggets in the world right here in Central Africa. Not too far to the west at the coast at Gabon, we got the Biafra where they say all the slaves were taken from. Over here, billions of years ago, it had a naturally occurring uranium reactor. So the same stuff they do with nuclear power here, they had a natural reactor. So we had a natural uranium reactor. We had large gold deposits, the highest lightning activity in the world, producing the Schumann resonance, which is at the same frequency as our brain waves when we're doing out-of-body experiences. I told you that Songo bone had 168 notches. The Ebo game chemical that I told you about that allows you to interface with the ancestors, it has exactly 168 electrons. I'm not playing with y'all right here. Central Africa in the now is not playing with you. All right, so this physical spine, with this being the throat, that being the tail, it was mapped to the sky in the form of the Vega cycle. So all of those different dates that I gave you in the book, this is what they correspond to. All right, so I told you how you get words for lion or cobra / serpent / asp. You get words for altar on the end. So if I got one thing up here, spine, and then I got my tailbone, which is actually made up of, if I recall, it's 3 bones fused. Hold on. Let me confirm that, because if it is, that actually plays perfectly into what I'm talking about here. Let me confirm it for y'all. I ain't got but a couple minutes. How many bones does the coccyx fuse? How many bones fuse to form the coccyx? There we go. For you can call it a bone. I don't need images. I need information. I need you to talk to me. Let's see. So we got 3 to 5 small bones. All right, that's all we need. That's what I was thinking. All right, so these bones, they fuse to form the coccyx, the tail. So this is where the Great Pyramid is going to be. So we're going to flip the world upside down. This is the south, this is the north. In order for me, in order for me to fall, I'm actually moving north. All right, so on one end, so this is a 25,000 4-year cycle. Okay. And this is alphanumerically Yud, which is a Cherokee word. So they preserved a lot of the semantics. It means basically to herd, to gather together. Like I told you, we're dealing with stuff in fourths, like I showed you on the diagram. So if I break that thing up into fourths, this divides into 4 even periods of 13, 16. That is M, A, and involve is pronounced with an O. So that means cat in Chinese comes from Meru in Tibetan. So that gives us our Meru again. All right. No, I'm sorry. It doesn't divide into 4 into that. My mistake. What I meant was it divides into 19 to give you that. And the significance of 19, the 19 code of the Quran, every 19 years we have what's called the Metonic cycle, which helps us to align the lunar and solar calendars. Most wars occur because of the difference between that 12th month and that 13th month. Okay. That 13th month they add so it's 7 years. So the 3rd, the 6th, the 8th, the 11th, the 14th, the 17th, and the 19th year. They add an extra month in order to even out and balance out the calendar. This is called intercalary years. The star Vega is known as Abhijit, and Krishna equates himself with that. So it's the hidden ones, the hidden blackness, or whatever I talked about, the source of things, the hidden black. He hides this because anyone who attacks, it's called the victorious one, because anyone who attacks or goes to war during that time, they will be victorious. So the 17th year of the Metonic cycle that happens leading up to the eclipse of Thales, which happens in the 19th year of that same Metonic cycle. If you don't know about the eclipse of Thales, it ended the war between the Medians, which are the people from the region where that Shasu Tayahu inscription where we get the name Yahweh comes from. They were fighting with the Lydians, which is a fancy word for white folk. I was messing with you, but pretty much. But essentially, the end of fighting between black and white happened because this eclipse happened exactly when he told them it would, because he was using the math. He had the knowledge of self. And the 17th year, that same period, was the destruction of the Temple of Jerusalem, of the first temple. Nebuchadnezzar attacked during that time because it was guaranteed that he would be successful. It was guaranteed by God himself. And so it's tied to that same cycle. Like I told you, 24,004 years, divided up into those 16 segments. Now, those 13, so 13,106 Metonic cycles gets divided into 4. Each one of those is 329 Metonic cycles. 329 is the Catan Gematria, meaning if you add the positional values 1 through 22 for the Hebrew letters instead of like the values assigned to them through traditional gematria, Genesis 1:1 adds up to 329. So 1/4 of that is Genesis. On the Yoa cosmogram from the Congo, Central Africa, this section right here represents the transition from the inception spark to birth, and then that section is called, that the birth is called Kala. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, I have become Kala, the destroyer of worlds. He is talking about time. He is saying that in time all things will die or whatever. So you've already won this war. Krishna hid the knowledge of Abhijit or whatever so that the enemy would not exploit that information in order to gain victory over the righteous people. And in that book, it is called the Jaya. All right. So that's the root of Abhijit. So it's the victory. All right. The star Vega is considered the center of this 25,004 year cycle. The exact middle of it is the 507 to 586 BCE period in which siege of Jerusalem happens and the temple is destroyed. So that shows you that the Yuda is the herd. People who are sent out from the source to incarnate here. The very first year of this cycle with the first period of this Metonic cycle is 13088 to 13087 BCE. That comes out to Molk, which means brain, mind. This is hold on, I'm doing this wrong. No, it should be 389 and 388. So that comes over here. That is the brain. But 13089 is Mohi, the Maori spelling for Moses, and the Sanskrit word for delusion, burning bush. That's how he spoke to Yahweh. So he had to get into that state. All right, and then on the opposite end of that 24,004 year cycle is 915 to 11916 CE or AD. That is ASAE, which means altar or to burn up, black. This is A19 is S, 16 is P, ass, so the cobra, so the black burnt Cobra is the Nakash. So Nehushtan, the brass serpent that is to be lifted up, to be exalted, is Christ telling you that the tail end is in the north, just like the Nile River. So Meru, the anointed one that they're talking about, the thing that saves you, is using the pyramid to understand how you yourself are not just a pharaoh, but Paramedu. We are the word that was in the beginning. We are the logos, the logic. We are the Manu, as they call it in the Hindu sphere. But that is way more than enough for today. I'm gonna wrap it up here. And we'll get into the next joint tomorrow, but that's a master class on essentially how we encode it in our body, in the skies, and in the Torah, who we are, what we are, so that we don't let them other people tell us otherwise. We created them. Devil means to throw across, to cast, or slanderer. So it means false accuser, to give false names to things. To the reason that the Tower of Babel was broken down was because they said they were trying to make a name for themselves, which is the forming of individual nations, individual tribes. Remember, we were united before, but if you sit there and you try to separate us and try to make it seem like we all a different thing, no, you all came from us. You all came from the original people of planet Earth. And there's your evidence. I'm out of here, y'all. Make sure that you subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, share this with somebody. Go back, watch it, study it. Peace.